you ever broken the law before? Wow, there's a lot of yes. I wasn't expecting such enthusiasm. Yep. Big crime guy over here. It's like, all right. Maybe we need to talk about something else here. All right. But no, we probably all on some level broken the law. I've always tried to be somebody who doesn't generally commit crimes. Just as it happens. As a good person, as just a person in general, a member, we live in a society where it's not really encouraged to break laws. But let's be honest, we've all broken laws, but I try to stay away from any serious ones. I stick to the harmless ones, like the hen day is 100 kilometers an hour, but what you gonna do? Sometimes I try to make my 10-minute commute in 2 minutes, and you gotta do what you gotta do. Or maybe, I grew up in a generation when we didn't know that it was stealing to download music or movies off of the internet. And I might have downloaded a few albums and a couple of movies, saw Finding Nemo without paying for it. It was 2002, it was a wild time. It was crazy. But my greatest moment of crime probably came that did sound ridiculous as I said it. My greatest moment of crime and my most stressful moment of crime came recently. I'm about to spill the tea. I was at the grocery store, and I don't like going to grocery stores. I used to, but then COVID happened, and for some reason I don't like it anymore. I'm more of an Instacart guy. It's fancy, I know. But I went to a grocery store, and what I've learned about grocery stores recently is that they still are stuck with this putting money in the cart thing. Who's carrying loonies anymore? So I have just enough groceries that I need between a full cart and the little basket that they're gonna give you for free. So you don't have to put a loonie in the basket. I don't have the money. So I, of course, get the basket because I'm a grown man and I'll just not pay I'm not gonna go back to my car. I'm not gonna go break a 10 or find a 10, search under my seat to see if there's any loose change from 2019 that's still in there. So I'm going to carry the basket, and of course there's going to be a moment where the basket is full after like 3 things are in there, and then I'm going to have to be Superman and carry things, balance them on my head and shoulders and whatnot. And I hit a point where, I was doing okay, but I'd run out of space in the bag, and it was literally at capacity. And I realized, I'm walking by kind of the drink section. I was like, I forgot I need to get some of those Mio Sport electrolyte things, the little packs. Now, you would think that they would fit anywhere in the bag. I'm telling you, we were at capacity. There was no room left. It was no space. So what's the logical thing you do? You just put it in your pocket, right? Right? Pockets are there for a reason. They're there to carry things. Why not? Later that evening, after paying for all my groceries, I got home. And I'm in the kitchen, and I kind of put my hands in my pocket. Uh-oh. This isn't good. I'm going to go to jail. I'm going to prison. I won't do well in prison. It's not going to go well for me. I'm a big guy, but I'm not that tough, and they're going to make an example of me right away. I'm going to get beat up, or I'm going to have to rise through the ranks and be the crime lord of the prison. I had already committed to this new life of mine at this point, all over the one Mio that I had found in my pocket. And then you start to wrestle with, what do I do with this Mio? Because it's like $1.50. But I didn't pay for it. So I was like, it's not a big deal. I'm not going to have to worry about that. No one cares. I'm sure God doesn't care. But I didn't pay for it. So I went through the evening, and I was like, you know what, it's fine. I drank my electrolyte drink, and then I realized that my conscience couldn't take it anymore. It shows how well I would do in prison. And I decided I need to return this thing. And on my drive back, or at least pay the $1.50. On my drive back, I remember going up to a red light, and a police car pulled up behind me. Anxiety started to build. My criminal past flashing before my eyes. Started to panic a little bit. I got out of the car, I said, you got me! I give up! Take me away! Then they drove away looking at me like I was crazy. That's not true, that part didn't happen. But I felt the anxiety, and then when I went into the grocery store, you should have seen the clerk's face. He was like, you want to return this? I want to pay for it. it costs us more to put it through the debit machine than it does to actually pay for it. I felt like in my heart I had to return this thing. Not because I'm some great person, but because I just felt like that was what I had to do, I guess. But I had this tension, like it was a real tension. Like it really, like I wouldn't blame someone if they didn't go back, but I felt like I had to. Because I didn't feel like that was appropriate, and I felt a little bit, I joke, but like I had committed a crime. Now maybe you've committed a real crime in your life. Maybe you've done something that made you, actually maybe you served some time in prison, or maybe you've been arrested, or maybe you've done something serious and never got caught. But here's the truth, whether you stole or borrowed a mio, or whether you've been involved in significant crime, broken the law, done something where you've actually gotten in trouble, stolen, hurt somebody. We're all criminals. We're all on some level have committed a crime against God. And if you were with us last week as we were talking through our Easter story, through this season, through this series, I touched on the reality of our rebellion, not just personally, but as humanity, historically, from the beginning of time, basically, through to today, against God via sin. When we sin, when we do anything that is outside of God's plan and his best plan for our lives, defined by the Bible clearly, and by the words of Jesus and God through his word, then we have committed a crime, a rebellion, an insurrection against God's way of living. We have committed sin. And sin comes from this original word, which really just means, it means within the idea of a bow and arrow not hitting the target. If it's off of the target, if it doesn't hit the bullseye, it's a sin. It's off target. It's missed the mark. And that's what sin is. It's missing the target. It's missing what is best. It's not in alignment with what is best for our lives. And I talked about how that led to the fall of humanity. We were originally planned, if you look at the book of Genesis at the beginning of the Bible, the first half in the Old Testament, it talks about how we sinned against God, and we originally were supposed to be with him in perfection with no pain, no suffering, in a place called the Garden of Eden, basically heaven on earth, and we sinned, the first humans, and through that we all have this inherent sin nature in us, but that original sin that continues through today created a chasm and a divide and a break between ourselves and God, because God is so perfect and sin is so the opposite. God cannot exist with sin, so when we became one with sin through our rebellion and our actions, we can't be with God. But God puts this plan in place. God puts this messianic or this chosen one that he says is going to come and going to make things right. And they think it's all sorts of different people, but it lands on Jesus, God on earth. And that brings us to Easter. Jesus did all sorts of incredible things. Number one, he brought relationship to us and bridged that gap with God. That's the primary and most important thing he did, but he showed us how to live, and that's why we look to the Bible to see, number one and primarily, how we can get connected to God, how in spite of our sin, we can still be connected to God through Jesus, the good news of the gospel, the good news of the cross. But beyond that, there's so much that Jesus did. There's so many examples of how he lived his life that we can emulate and replicate and live the best way that we ever could. Live the best life that anyone ever could, replicating and following the example of Jesus. And if you've never been to church before and heard this, following Jesus and living your life the way that he modeled in the Bible is the best way you can live your life. No matter what you're walking through, no matter what your ethnic background is, your polysocial economic background is, Jesus is the answer to the problems in your life. Jesus is the answer to bring perspective that will help you through any and all situations, and you need to know that. But Jesus did so many things, and they were very controversial, which obviously led to his eventual murder, people turning on him. But he interacted with prostitutes, with thieves, and people, religious leaders would be like, hey, you can't be hanging out with those bad people. He'd say, sick people need a doctor, not healthy people. Like, need to go spend time with these people. I need to love them. And that was totally opposite than what religious leaders were doing at the time. But what ended up happening often, and one theme that we see over and over again, is not just with tax collectors, thieves, prostitutes. We see him with all sorts of criminals. And there's a couple of different circumstances and criminals that I want to talk about today. The first one is found here in the book of Mark. And if you've never really read the Bible before, the second half is the New Testament. We reference the Old Testament, the first half. New Testament starts with Jesus' life, and they're called the Gospels, these 4 books, these first-person accounts of Jesus' followers who were with him. And it goes Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. And we're going to look in the book of Mark in chapter 15. And this is after Jesus has been arrested. And he's being kind of paraded through, and he's being charged, and they're taking him to the Roman officials, a guy named Pilate. It says this in verse 6. Now it was custom at the festival to release a prisoner whom the people requested. A man called Barabbas was in prison with the insurrectionists who had committed murder in the uprising. The crowd came up and asked Pilate to do for them what he usually did. Do you want me to release to you the king of the Jews? Asked Pilate, knowing it was out of self-interest that the chief priests had handed Jesus over to him. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have Pilate release Barabbas instead. What shall I do then with the one you call the king of the Jews? Pilate asked them. Crucify him, they shouted. Why? What crime has he committed? Asked Pilate. But they shouted all the louder, crucify him. Wanting to satisfy the crowd, Pilate released Barabbas to them. He had Jesus flogged and handed him over to be crucified. So there's this opportunity that happens every year in this festival, in this season, during the celebration, where one prisoner is saved, basically. They just set one free. It's kind of like a get-out-of-jail-free card. Get out of being crucified. This is beyond just going to prison. Crucifixion, and I've said this before, but maybe you haven't heard it. The cross is not just something that was casual. It's one of the most horrific ways that humanity has ever thought of capital punishment. It's the most horrific electric chair. It's the most horrific, just like lethal injection. All those things are so kind compared to crucifixion. You get nailed, your hands into the wood and your feet into the wood, and you don't. I always thought as a kid, and even into some of my probably teenage, young adult years, that yeah, okay, well, that, you get pierced through your hands and feet, like you're going to bleed out, like you could die from that. No, you die of suffocation and exhaustion, as you have to, your diaphragm falls in on itself. You have to push up with the nails digging in for every single breath just to get another breath of air. And this often would go on for days and days in the scorching hot sun. It was torture upon torture upon torture. And so they're going to give somebody a free pass. And they've got Barabbas, who was a part of an insurrection, a rebellion against the government. He didn't even hide it. He was probably proud of it. It's like this was his identity. He wanted to rebel and cause this turnover of government. People had died. People were murdered. He was a part of a murder. And they have an opportunity to release one person, and you have Jesus, who has literally done nothing wrong. Even Pilate, the Roman official, knows. And he even knows enough to be kind of like, hey, guys, like, I could set Barabbas free, or I could let this really nice guy, Jesus, go. And they're like, murder Jesus. And they do. Barabbas, the murderer, goes off free. And Jesus, who had done nothing but care for people, heal people, love people, lived a sinless, perfect life, is carried off to be flogged, beaten, tortured. I don't know about you, that sounds a lot like injustice to me. That's wrong. If I'm there watching that and we're reading it, we kind of know the story a little more, but if I'm in there in person, if I'm watching this happen for the first time right in front of me, I'd be furious. How can this be allowed to happen? This is one of the greatest injustices ever. A murderer and a rebel who doesn't even hide his crimes, is proud of his crimes, is set free, and Jesus is murdered. Jesus takes the place that Barabbas rightfully deserved. Jesus is beaten, tortured, hung on a cross, and given the full Barabbas treatment. He's given the full treatment that Barabbas deserved. There's another example of criminals that Jesus comes into account with. And we're found in another one of the books that's called the Gospels. It's in the book of Luke in chapter 23. As he's being crucified, he's been put up on the cross, and he's hanging there, and he's suffering. And this is well into his crucifixion, into his murder, into his capital punishment. It says, there was a written notice above him which read, "This is the King of the Jews." One of the criminals who hung there hurled insults at him. "Aren't you the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other criminal rebuked him. "Don't you fear God," he said. "Since you are under the same sentence, we are justly being punished, for we are getting what our deeds deserve. But this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And Jesus answered him, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise." A couple of different perspectives. 3 different criminals that all came into account, all came into direct contact in this moment, in this event of Jesus' crucifixion, of his murder. All 3 of them had an encounter of some sort, and all 3 of them encountered Jesus very differently. And they all had very different experiences. But these 2, they were actually being crucified. They didn't get out like Barabbas. They're on the cross on either side, being crucified and murdered. They're being tortured and they're in pain for their actual crimes. That's something that even the criminal agrees to there. It says, we are getting what we deserve, which means they must have done something pretty bad to be tortured like, no, I deserve this. I earned this. One of them mocks Jesus and says, you can't even save yourself. Get us off of here. I don't know, you're God. You say you're God. You say you have all this power. Get yourself off and bring me with you. The other one scolds that guy and says, don't you know who this is? He professes faith and agrees that Jesus is God. Jesus is King, that Jesus is in control. And he says, when you go to heaven, when you're in your kingdom, remember me. And Jesus promises him, your faith means that I will remember you and you'll be in paradise with me, that you'll be in heaven with me. You will see the kingdom of God with me. 2 criminals, 2 perspectives, 2 outcomes. One with faith and one who rejects faith. One in heaven with Christ and one who rejects heaven with Christ. The one in heaven was just as much a criminal as the one who rejects Christ. He didn't lose his criminality. He didn't lose that part of him. He didn't suddenly become forgotten that he had done these things. He just laid down his pride and he accepted what was right in front of him. That was God on earth on the cross. It was right in front of him. It was right in front of both of them. And both of them had a decision to make. One of them made the right one, and one of them made the wrong one. So what about the decision that Barabbas could have made? The truth is, we don't know what happened to Barabbas after this. He experienced something so wild when you think about it. He experienced literally the physical embodiment of Jesus taking his place. And I like to wonder, and this isn't in the Bible, but as I think about what could Barabbas have done? Because there's a couple options. He could have ran off and continued his rebellious efforts to try and overthrow the Roman guard. Maybe he just continued on. He took that opportunity and said, here's my chance to do it right this time. I'll murder more people this time. I'll do it better. I don't know. Maybe he just continued on the same path. Or maybe he turned his life away. He said, that was too close for comfort. I'm going to become a law-abiding citizen. I'm going to serve soup down at a shelter. I'm going to volunteer at the library. I don't know what good people do. Those types of things. He's just going to be that guy. Get a sweater vest and be a good old dude. Just be chill. No more insurrections. Full dad mode. Start a family. But I like to think that he followed Jesus. I like to think that he would have followed behind and watched what should have happened to him. What he deserved. To watch Jesus take his place. Not in a, that should be me, that's great, in a negative way, but to actually wrestle with the reality that I deserve that. That should be me up there. I don't deserve this. Jesus doesn't deserve to be up there, but I do. And to watch the pain and the suffering. Because while Barabbas is a symbol of great injustice, I think he had the greatest perspective. He is one of, if not the only human in history who had the chance to physically see Jesus directly take his place in the suffering that he deserved and have it taken on him. To take what he deserved, he got to witness it live. He got to witness live what is offered to each and every single one of us. Today, tomorrow, and through all of time. To have our place taken. To have our crimes covered. Our punishment for our crimes replaced. And I like to think that Barabbas would have had a choice because his place was already taken. As he saw Jesus take his final breath, he had the opportunity to then do what one of those criminals did, the one that had faith, that died beside Jesus on the cross, and to put his faith in the God that covered his sin. To see that there was something to this. There was something to this Messiah. There was something to the King of the Jews. There was something to Jesus that clearly mattered. And the truth is this, while we don't know that Barabbas did that, we are faced with that same potential choice. Jesus has already taken your place. You don't have to wait. You don't have to follow behind. You don't have to see if it happens. I'm here to tell you, it happened. He died for you. Not just for all of us, but just for you individually. You were enough. You are enough. In all of your depravity, in all of the sin, in all of the crimes, in all of the negative things you've done, you've said, and you ever will do or say, Jesus still looked at you individually and said, she's worth it. He's worth it. I know what you've done. I know what you will do. You are still worth every whip, every drop of blood, every crying out of pain, moment of suffering, every second of it. He looked at you in the future, you sitting here today and whatever you're walking through, and he said, they're worth it. And they'll always be worth it. And if you've ever felt like you're worthless, you need to hear this right now. That's how much worth you have. Never doubt that you have value. Your value doesn't come from your perfection or your actions because we all are criminals. But it comes through Christ, who's made us clean, who's taken your past. It's still there, but he covers it up and he says, you're not defined by that. You are defined by me. You can be connected to God. And just as Barabbas no longer had to carry the weight, his permanent record was wiped clean. He was covered and Jesus took that place. You have that same experience. You have that same freedom. So what is it for you? The sacrifice has been made. What will you do with this newfound freedom, with this opportunity that you don't deserve, but that you have, that you don't have to work for? It's been given, it's been offered. What will you do? Will you run to freedom? Or will you continue in the prison of your rebellion and your sin? Will it become a cheap grace, something that was just like, wow, that was a close call, like I'm glad that happened? Will it just be a passive thing? Or will you embrace the reality of what you have in front of you? Will you seize the opportunity to not just live life, but to live life to the fullest, to live fully, to experience everything that this life has to offer? Not just pleasures and things that are exciting in the moment, but a holistic, valuable life that is going to leave you so full, so fulfilled, so happy beyond anything that culture can offer you, anything that your sexual identity can offer you, beyond anything that your relationship with a guy or a girl or whatever is going to offer you. A job, money, success, fame, Instagram followers, TikTok fame. I don't care what it is. None of it is going to hold a candle to what a life with Jesus Christ is going to bring you. Don't miss out. This is what you need. This is the only way. You can chase after everything else. Other gods, other religions, idols in your life, money, fame, all those things. You will never be satisfied. You will chase. You will walk the earth until your shoes are filled with blood, and you will not be able to find what you're looking for, because there's only one way. We're all faced with a choice. So I want to ask you, which criminal are you going to be? Because we're all criminals. In your Barabbas moment, which criminal will you be? Will you be the one that stands and says, Jesus is God, remember me? That even though he only had moments to live, gave whatever he had left to Christ? Or will you be the one that passes it off, rejects him? Which criminal are you going to be? Because you're always going to be guilty of your crimes, but you don't have to be defined by them. In fact, you're not defined by them. You're defined by your faith in Jesus. You're defined by what he's done and what he's called you to do and who he's called you to be. Beyond what's been put on you, beyond the mistakes you've made, he has defined you and designed you to be something so much more than you could ever imagine. And there's hope in Jesus. If you're feeling hopeless, there is hope in Jesus. And it's not just because he died. Because that's the good news of Easter Sunday. That's why we celebrate today. It's not just because he died on the cross, but it's because 3 days later, just like it was promised in all through the Old Testament, in that original promised plan of redemption that God put in, he would rise again. He would defeat death. And he did. 3 days later, he rose from the grave and he took death and he gained victory over it. And this is captured in 1 Corinthians 15. It says, when the perishable has been clothed with the imperishable, and the mortal with immortality, then the saying that is written will come true. Death has been swallowed up in victory. Where, O death, is your victory? Where, O death, is your sting? The sting of death is sin, and the power of sin is the law. But thanks be to God, he gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. He gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Death has been swallowed up in victory. No matter what you walk through, what you're walking through, and I'm sure in a room this size, this many people, there's a lot of stuff, a vast array of experiences and struggles, whether you're walking through sickness, addiction, relationships breaking down, romance breaking down, the things that are just crippling you, whether it's physical, emotional, depression, anxiety, chemical, I don't know what you're walking through. But you need to know this, is that the nuts and bolts and the most important thing is a relationship with Jesus takes you away from sin. It covers your sin. But you need to know this too. Jesus has victory over death. Not just that he rose up, not just that death couldn't hold him down and now he's not dead anymore, but he walks with us when we make the best decision that we could ever make, and that's to follow Christ, to make him Lord of our life and to pattern our life after him. He walks everywhere with us. We have Jesus in every situation, in every context. We're never, ever alone. And the hope of Jesus is that he defeated death, and no matter what the weight of your circumstances is, no matter what the weight of your walking through is, it may seem insurmountable. It may seem like a giant in front of you. It may seem like you're never going to be able to get past it ever. It ain't death. And the one who defeated death, who swallowed up death in victory, is walking with you through all of it. And he promises you that he will be there. Because death, where is your victory? It ain't there. Because Jesus swallowed up death and victory. And I'm not just telling you that to get up here and get excited and get in my preacher voice and ramp up everything. It's all good and real, but I need to tell you, this is what you need. This is what you need. And if you don't feel like you need it now, you will. At some point in your life, you will feel like you need this. You may not know that this is what you're looking for, but you will. We need Jesus in the good times. But I know that we're walking through hard times. And if I can be honest with you, if I didn't have Jesus in my life, I don't know where I'd be. I'd I've been walking through some stuff in the last year of my life that's been so hard. The hardest year of my life. And there are times where, you find yourself just broken on the floor, just feel like the world is falling down around you. And you don't have answers. I think we've probably been there, all of us on some level. You don't have an answer. It's not. And there's no counselor that could tell you what to do. They might help. It's good. There's no friend that has the answer. What do you do when there's no answer? When no matter how hard you strategize, there's no way to get out of it. There's no solution. I'll tell you this. The power of Jesus Christ, who defeated death and can defeat whatever you're walking through and can hold you up when you can't stand anymore. That is the hope of Easter. That is the hope of the cross. And without that, I don't know where I am today, but I'll tell you where I am today. I'm here in your presence, in the presence of God, saying Jesus is good and my life is amazing. In spite of anything that's happened or will happen, Jesus rose from the grave. He defeated death, and you don't have to be scared. You don't have to live in that suffering. You don't have to live in that pain. You don't have to be owned by the problems in your life, because death has been swallowed up in victory. And Jesus, who did that, walks with you through everything. And let me tell you from personal experience, he won't give up on you. He will never abandon you, and you are in good hands, and your life is safe no matter what storm is blowing and destroying around you, because Christ is with you. And if you've never experienced that, I'm telling you right now, not just because I have to because I'm a pastor, but because it's the truth that I've experienced, and I've seen it 1,000 times. You need this. Don't miss out. So I'm going to give you an opportunity. Maybe you did this a long time ago and you need to do it again. It's been a long time you've been running from Jesus. Maybe you're walking through some stuff and you need to recenter your life on Jesus. Or maybe you never thought you'd even be in church or tune in online. You're like, I need this. Everything you're talking about, I need this. We're not going to make you do an obstacle course. We're not going to make you do a test. We're not going to make you prove you're not a robot. We're not going to do anything like that. It's as simple as just telling Christ, I believe in you, and then committing your life to follow him. Between you and God, I can't do it for you. So if that's you, just pray along with me. God, thank you for sending your son, Jesus. We're so thankful that you came, you lived, you died on the cross. I admit and I acknowledge and I believe that you are God. You died on the cross and you covered my sins, and there is nothing that you can't do. I want to pattern my life after you. I want to act, I want to think, and I want to speak more like you every day. But beyond anything that I can act, I just want to know you. I want to be forgiven for my sins. I'm sorry for the mistakes I've made, but I believe and I trust that you forgive me. And I pray for that forgiveness, and I accept that forgiveness. Make me more like you. Help me to be the best I can be in your eyes and in your patterns. In Jesus' name, amen. If that's you, there's going to be a link up on the screen. That's the greatest decision you can ever make in your life. And if you haven't talked to anyone about that, even if you put it on the screen, even if you text us, just DM us, come talk to someone, talk to a pastor. Don't leave this place without talking to somebody. We want to celebrate with you and get you started off on the right foot in your journey with Jesus. But we're going to sing a song just to close here. We've talked about being a criminal. We've talked about our depravity. We've talked about the mistakes we've made, but we have also talked about the hope that comes from Jesus. And as we sing this song, and ask the prayer team to come up, I want you to know no matter what you're walking through, there is hope because he rose again. There is hope because he is risen. And we believe that if you bring your problems to God, and we know, and I've seen it in my own life, he will step in and he will bring peace. And so if you need prayer, the prayer team's going to be up here. Don't leave here without getting prayed for. Don't leave here without bringing what you're going through to Jesus, and we'll agree with you that he's going to step in. But just in your own space, if you just want to worship, sing the song, read the words on the screen, that's cool. But I would just encourage you to focus in and center in and remember that no matter what your crime, he rose again, and you have hope because of him. You're never abandoned.